Dr. Herman, we'll come back to that question after Dr. Herman is done with her presentation. We're happy you're on. We're sorry you had some difficulties. We don't want you to be frazzled or anything, so
Oh,
welcome.
thank you.
All
Yep,
right.
we're good now.
Right, great. All right, well, we're ready to begin. So I'll just turn it over to you and welcome, and you're ready to go.
Awesome. Oh, come on. Okay, can you see the right slide?
We can. You can
Okay,
skip over
perfect.
those. Those are great. We're beyond those, so you can start with your
We're
first
beyond
slide.
those.
Yes.
I appreciate Jake taking the lead on some of the issues that we do see in our cull animals, and I'm going to say cull animals because we do see that on the beef side too. But today we're here focusing on the dairy side. So what I'm going to start with is our results from the National Beef Quality Audit from 2022 with a focus on market cows and bulls. And I am going to do a shout out to my teammate, Michaela Klauser, who led this project and helped uh, bring all this data together to a usable fashion. But for those of you who may not know what the National Beef Quality Audit is, this is a every 5-year-ish study that the beef industry goes into, that we're basically trying to figure out what we're doing in the cattle industry with these animals that are going through our processing plants, both on the fed side and then also on the market cow and bull side. And so it's a multi-tier process. We interview buyers of beef, we conduct in-plant data collection, and we have a strategy session on looking at that data and basically like what can we do better in the next 5 years with the animals and the products that we are producing. And so you can see here, the blue is our fed cattle plants and the red is our cow and bull plants. You can see that we have cow and bull plants from across the country. And so we really try to be as complete with this data as possible. But I will put a caveat on this that COVID happened, and COVID, as everyone knows, kind of threw a wrench into a lot of things. But our data ended up being from 21 to 22 instead of 20 to 21. So but I'm just going to bring out some highlights from the market cow and bull side on what we saw and just some potential things that we can do as an industry to improve the animals that are going into that end market system. But first of all, with the beef quality assurance program, so in my I didn't hear the intro, but I am the veterinarian on the beef quality assurance team, and so this is something that we care a lot about. This is a care and welfare best management guidelines program for the cattle industry. Many people who are shipping animals to the packing plants are familiar with beef quality assurance. And this is an interesting one that I want people to take note of. In Wisconsin, you're lucky that you have a couple of cow plants closer to you. Not everybody in the U.S. is able to do that. So when we look at a number of factors, time traveled from that last that's that last leg of the trailer trip. So whether it's from the sale barn, whether it's directly from the farm, maybe it's from a buying station to the processing plant, mean time traveled is 6 hours, but you can see a max is up to 24 hours, and that's just that last leg. And we you may or may not know that many animals don't go straight from the farm to the processing plant. There's lots of uh, segments in between, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But think about that as we're making these decisions to put these animals on trailers. Distance traveled anywhere, up to over 1,000 miles for that last leg. Uh, Area allotted per head. Ideally, we need 18 square foot for a 1,200 pound animal. I think that's what it is. But we know that many of our dairy animals are not that small. So we want to make sure that we're making sure they have enough stocking density in that trailer, whether it's the trailer or the cattle pot. You can see on here that the minimum, that 8 square foot per animal, that's way too high. When we increase that stocking density, if those animals are thin, that increases the risk of bruising, and then as they get to the packing plant, we lose a lot of that product. So many of our market cows and bulls, they come from the auction market, but they're also coming from that buying station directly from the dairy. These are what the drivers told us in this survey. But what we want to, the transportation piece within the cattle industry is very complex, and it has a lot of pieces to it that sometimes we don't fully understand the trip that those animals take. And so in this example, we have an older cow, so say lactation 3 or 4. She's a BCS of 3, and she's slightly lame on that rear leg. Jake was already talking about lame animals, so we're going to give you a lameness example. If she gets transported 2 hours to a consolidation location, maybe she's held overnight, that lame leg gets a little worse. She's also being introduced to a lot of unfamiliar environments, unfamiliar cattle, and she drops a body condition score. So that's about 100 pounds, depending on how strenuous these trips are. That's not unheard of. Then she gets transported another 4.5 hours to the packing plant. And since this is a dairy cow, she hasn't been milked this whole time. And she has to walk into the packing plant, because if she goes down, she gets condemned. And so over this total travel time is 5 days with a total of 15 hours, and she hasn't been milked. So there's a lot of considerations when you're deciding to put that animal onto the trailer. Where is she going to go? And can you guarantee that she's going to go there? Just because you have a cull cow plant close to you doesn't necessarily mean she goes there. And we have an example from our 2016 audit. We actually had a dairy cow that was sold in California, and she was killed in the Pennsylvania plant. And so even though there was a cull cow plant in California, that's not where she ended up getting harvested. So I guess I challenge us that if we can't guarantee where that animal is going to end up, let's try to take that animal direct to slaughter. On the mobility side, you can see that beef cows and dairy cows are a little bit different. We do use the Meat Institute's mobility scoring in this study, and so that's a 1 through 4, with 1 being normal, 2 being a slight limp, but still keeps up with the animals, and 3 is difficulty keeping up with the rest of the herd. And you can see here that our dairy cows, with that mobility score 2, we have an increased percentage of animals with that mobility score 2, but the mobility score 3 is where I want you to really look at. So those are the ones that are going to be those challenging ones that may not withstand the rigors of transport to get to their final harvest destination. Body condition scores, I thought I hid this. I'm showing you this just to show that we saw thin animals on the beef side as well during this quality audit. At the time when these animals were happening, there was a huge drought going all the way through the Midwest, and that's where a lot of our thin beef cows came from. We would like our animals, when they're going to the harvest floor, to be at that like 4 and above, because you get a higher quality product and it's a less chance of bruising. But you can see that we had the darker maroon color. We had more BCS 3, 2s, and 1s in our beef animals. And similar in our dairy animals, we had more thin animals. And so BQA Transportation, Fitness for Transport, recommends that any body condition score equal to or less than 2 on either the beef or the dairy scale, they are not fit for transport, because of they have an increased risk of going down, they have an increased risk of bruising, and it can be a welfare issue. So you can see that our dairy cows are also a little thinner in this 2022 audit. These are some examples of some thinner beef cows, but I want you to look at the carcass. And so you can see the bone, like where the pins and the hooks are. There's not a lot of coverage there. And even along the ribs and along the spine, when those animals, if you increase that stocking density in the trailer, then you're going to have an increased risk of bruising because there's not a lot of coverage to buffer that. And so we would prefer cattle with no bruises, and you can see that we actually had less animals with no bruises, or the other way to think about it is more bruising in 2022. And we think it's because we had so many animals that were those lower body condition scores. Bruise severity, if any of you have looked into or been in the packing plant, one I'd highly recommend if you're able to go tour that. You can see what those workers have to look for when they're cutting out bruising or pieces of meat that is not fit for human consumption. They're very talented and very good at what they do, but we should be trying to minimize their work, if you will, on cutting all those pieces out. So there's minimal, major, and critical bruising, and you can see the bruise size key down at the bottom. But we, in our 2022 audit on the far right, we had more major bruising than we did in the previous audit, and we had less minimal bruising. Again, we think this is from the low body condition score. I'm going to skip this one. So when we look at percentage of bruises on all cattle, I'm going to fly through this real quick. This is a fed cattle carcass, so you can see how much meat and coverage that it has at those different, like the hooks and the pins and the ribs, like we saw, or like we looked at on the thinner carcass. Where we see bruising is a lot on the hind end and along the backside, and a lot of this is facilities. And it's also handling. So as those animals are going into the cattle pot, if they are not being handled calmly, sometimes they'll jump as they go down into the belly and they scrape their back. And a lot of our taller animals, especially our Holsteins, are more at risk for that. And so that makes it even more important, one, to have cattle pots and trailers that can fit our super tall animals, but also that calm handling as we're loading those animals prior to going to the sale barn or to the processing plant. These are some pictures of bruising that can happen from those facilities. Again, these are fat cattle, but you can see that the bruising goes all along the spine, right along the back rump, and then even on the side where the ribs are. And so all of that super red tissue just has to get thrown away. That's not fit for human consumption. And so this is what happens when what happens to that bruising. It gets cut out, and we're losing a lot of product from those really high value cuts. The percentage of primary hide color observed, you can see here on the market cow and bull, we're receiving a lot of animals from the dairy industry. So over 60% are black and whites, and then that's not counting all of our other dairy breeds that are coming in. Arthritic joints, this is something, so we look at defects in this in the National Beef Quality Audit Survey too, and this is a win for the cattle industry. So you can see that arthritic joints are going down significantly since 1999. The reason this is an issue is, one, it's an animal welfare issue. If animals are getting transported and walking into the harvest facility with arthritic joints, they're likely in pain, and they're more at risk to get injured. But when we started with this survey, with these audit results, with these audit results, what we did was, when we saw how many arthritic joints were coming in, we recommended people to cull those animals at an earlier lameness. You can see that arthritic joints went down at the packing plant. Another reason this is an issue is at the packing plant, when that carcass is hung, if that arthritic joint gets nicked with the knife or anything like that, that joint fluid becomes a contaminant, and we have to throw away up to that entire quarter if that arthritic joint gets opened. So this is a welfare issue and it's a food safety issue, but you can see that the industry has done a really good job of decreasing that defect. Other defects we look at: full bags, retained placenta, failed suspensory ligament, mastitis. These are all different things that we looked at in the quality audit. I have a slide for the full bag, but just the full bag itself is not a defect. It's the milk inside it. So if there's milk leaking on the carcass while it's hanging, that is also a food safety issue. That's considered a contaminant. And if the milk splashes on any of that meat, we have to cut that out and throw it away. And so that's why it's a defect. The full bag itself is not the defect, it's the milk inside it. So in dairy cows, swollen joints was the number one thing we saw, foot abnormalities, and we also saw a lot of broken tails. And we do see some foreign objects. We do see a lot of foreign objects in the market cow and bull sector. The number one thing that the participants that answered our questions saw was buckshot and birdshot. That's mostly in beef animals, but there were a smattering in dairy animals for some reason. Needles and wire are the biggest thing in the dairy industry that we see when it comes to foreign objects. This, not many, I'm hoping not many dairies are using remote delivery devices or darts, but this is something that can happen and that a number of our packing partners see on a regular basis is embedded darts. This is a needle that was found at a cull cow plant, and you can see this is actually in front of the scapula. What they think happened was they went too far, like they didn't stay in front of the shoulder when giving an injection, and the needle broke off on the scapula or the shoulder. And so they caught this needle before it went through the processing. I do want to acknowledge all the partners we had in this study. It was a huge undertaking. We had a lot of great grad students and researchers across the country adding to this. But I show you all that because I want to provide some guidance on producer and veterinarians' roles in all the data that we saw. And so what do we do with this new data? How do we use it as producers and veterinarians? We want to improve cattle health and welfare. That's our responsibility as caretakers. And what we did was what NCBA did was we developed a resource for producers and veterinarians to make better fitness for transport decisions. So we started off with a guide to cull cattle management. We call it the right way, right time. So this topics include fitness for transport criteria, how do we market animals earlier, recognize the reality of foreign materials, and then what are those animal welfare implications with the decisions that we are making. And we have to remember that animal well-being or animal welfare has to be considered in every decision made throughout the animal's life, even when I keep saying she, but most of the time we're talking about she's, when she leaves our farm or our operation. So we started off with with a beef version, and we just came out with the dairy version within the last month or so. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of the information through that. I do want to remind people that these are recommendations and thoughts to consider when you're making these plans with your team, including your veterinarian. Every operation is going to be different, and you are going to have different animal decisions to make, different economic decisions to make. Those are between you and the team that works with you. I can't make individualized recommendations for that, but I want you to consider some of the things that I'm talking about when you start changing your plan or adapting your plan. First thing we always that we talk about is making sure that you have a really good herd health plan. Customize that to each operation. Work with your veterinarian. When we focus on those preventive medicine practices, we minimize the risk of these defects or these lamenesses happening or other disease processes that might I guess diminish the quality of life of that animal as they go to the processing. So that can be stockmanship and handling, facility design. We've talked about some things with bruising that you could improve on that. Nutrition, so increasing body condition score, biosecurity. We don't want to be sending infectious animals to the packing plant, or as Jake already noted, like if you have a super severe pneumonia animal, what are the risks to food safety with that? There's a lot of things to consider when you're making these culling decisions. And much of that comes down to employee training. And a reminder that none of these happen in isolation. These overlap a lot, but all things to consider. That resource team, your veterinarian, nutritionist, extension specialist, all of them can be really great resources to come in and help you evaluate your herd. Exercises to consider. This slide was made, you can see that it's made for beef animals, but I thought the messaging still applies to your dairy operations. I realize that most of you BCS score throughout the year way more than we do in the beef industry, but I'm still going to put that on there. Separating your lower BCS cows, maybe you feed them out a little bit before you sell them. Stocking density in not just, stocking density can apply to your transport, your transportation, but also in your pens. That directly plays into animal welfare. And then really evaluating your euthanasia criteria. Make sure that we have really good criteria on when we need to euthanize animals from an animal welfare perspective. We owe it to those animals to make sure that they're not suffering. Alternative marketing, this is something that the dairy industry, you all are getting very creative on. Not the cull cow piece, but I know there's a lot of talk in, selling animals earlier so that you don't have as many older animals, and then maybe you don't have as many lame animals or those chronic conditions. Again, those are all things to talk about with your resource team, but we need to have stricter inclusion criteria regardless of the type of cattle that we're raising. They need to prove to us that they need to stay in our herd. Minimizing residues is another thing that we talk about in this right way, right time documents. These right way, right time documents. Record keeping is huge. We're still seeing quite a bit of residues coming out of the dairy industry. And so we want to make sure that you have those animals identified appropriately. If you do treat them, that record is kept up to date, and that we make sure that our safe to ship dates are appropriate. That withdrawal period, if you have multiple products, a reminder that you need to go or use the withdrawal period that is the longest of all the products that you use. And then compromised animals, there is some research saying that compromised animals don't process these products as well as a healthier animal. And so maybe that withdrawal time isn't, it might need to be longer. Again, something to talk about with your veterinarian. Having treatment protocols and training is is something that we have control over, that we can help with these not just the care of the animals, but also minimizing those residue, reading labels, making sure the products are stored and handled appropriately so that they're working well for you. Make sure you have protocols and labels in a language that your workers can understand, so that they know what they know what they're giving, but they also know where to find information about it if they need it. So prevention, early diagnosis, and therapy, these are all decisions that we need to make with our cull animals. But how would you teach this? If you are the manager of your dairy, how do you teach or communicate this to the rest of your team? How do you talk about foreign objects and cattle with your clients? In the dairy industry, this is like, how are you giving injections? How are you minimizing the risk of breaking those needles? That's a big one. Do you have magnets for your animals to reduce the risk of that wire creating problems? Excuse me. And then what should your producers be looking for? I think this is geared towards both veterinarians and owners, managers, employees. We need to communicate a little bit better about what we are actually looking for. And then if there's a problem, how do we catch it early in that disease process? And then how is an operation making that culling or marketing decision? We want to make sure that they are, we're providing as much support in that decision making as we can. Injection site placement. If you restrain the animal, it's safer for the animal, safer for the person. Do facility design and walkthrough. Make sure that you teach your folks how to keep themselves safe when they're giving injections. Neck access is really important to protect, the BQA triangle, we recommend in front of the slope of the shoulder, above the neck vertebrae, below that nuchal ligament or that neck ligament, when possible. I know it's not always possible in the dairy industry, but we really try to recommend, encourage people to use the neck access. But protect your hands, make sure your workers are being safe. But when you do have facilities, train your crew on how to use the chute, the head catch, the calf hutch, whatever. Make sure they're trained on how to do that appropriately. So one, they're not poking themselves with a needle, as somebody who shall remain nameless has done a couple times. Just make sure you're doing that to keep your workers safe too. A reminder that dairy animals don't just go for ground beef. I know that that's a huge ground beef and trim. I do think that's the where we get the most value out of our cull dairy animals, but we actually get a lot of value out of the whole muscle cuts. So the round actually goes to restaurants like Arby's. So that roast beef is from cull dairy cows. Bone-in chuck is what In-N-Out Burger uses for all of their products. And then a lot of our briskets are actually used quite a bit in the industry too. So I don't want people to think that you don't have to care about the whole muscle cuts in a dairy cow, because they are very valuable, and we actually consume that. We consume dairy cow meat a lot more than we think we do. Transportation is a big one that we can improve upon. So having effective communication with those who are transporting your animals. And then, do you know where your animals are going? This is what I if you have the option to send direct to slaughter, maybe that's a good option, especially for specific animals that may not make those long destinations or those long journeys. Do they actually end up there? I think that's a good question, and having that communication with your transporters is important to figure out where those animals are actually going. Different considerations for fitness for transport. This is within our beef quality assurance transportation guidelines. Lots of criteria where they are not fit for transport. So non-ambulatory animals should be euthanized. Make the decision to treat or cull or euthanize an animal as quickly as possible. Do not transport cattle with a BCS of less than or equal to 2 on the beef or dairy scale unless it's direct to transport. Bony fractures, don't transport heifers or cows where calving is imminent. That's an animal welfare issue for both the cow and the calf. But at the packing plants, they are not able to slaughter those animals until the placenta has passed. And so if you have animals that are close to calving or have just calved, you have to wait until that placenta has passed. But anything that conditions that will not pass pre-slaughter inspection, Jake and I would love to have a conversation with you about the surgeries, because I think that's a great consideration that we need to pay attention to. Terminal conditions, cancer eye, things like that, where they won't pass pre-slaughter inspection. Don't send them if they're not going to pass. This is directly from the Dairy Right Way, Right Time document. So cattle welfare should be considered alongside economic decisions in all the decisions that we make. But if you can market animals earlier so they're in a higher body condition score and better shape, maybe less lame, they can withstand that length of the trip, and they're also providing a better quality product at the end. Be realistic about the animal's chance of recovery. I feel like sometimes we're a little too hopeful with some of these animals that are chronic. Maybe we need to be more realistic and I guess have them prove that they are actually improving. And if they aren't, we need to make that culling or euthanasia decision earlier in the disease process. Withdrawal dates are important. Cows that are close to calving, we already talked about that. Recent fractures, those need to be assessed. So if you can transport them directly to a packing or processing facility, or if you have I don't know if you guys have companies that come to your farm and do on-farm slaughter, that's also an option for things like that. But we want to minimize the risk of animals becoming non-ambulatory or downers during transport, because if they arrive at the packing plant and they are down, they will be euthanized because of the risk of bovine spongiform encephalopathy. That is a USDA rule that all USDA inspected plants have to follow. Mobility scores, again, this is off of the Meat Institute scores, but market animals earlier, try to evaluate that locomotion score before loading onto a trailer. And if that animal can't stand for a period of time and repeatedly tries to lay down, don't transport her. She's likely to go down, likely not to be able to get up. And if she's non-ambulatory when they arrive at the processing plant, they have to euthanize her. Hip lifts and hobbles. So if animals show up to the packing plant with hobbles on them, they will also get euthanized. They have to be able to walk off the trailer unassisted, and hobbles are considered an assistance. So another thing to think about. Lots of training opportunities that are coming out of our Right Way, Right Time document. Stockmanship is a huge one. Timely marketing decisions, injection sites, which is also related to drug residues and drug management, biosecurity, evaluating transport trailers and hauling process. Work with your hauling companies and make sure that they are hauling to the welfare standards that you expect also. And that goes both ways. So if there are any transporters online, I would also challenge them to have that conversation with the folks that they're working with. Because if they don't feel comfortable transporting those animals, there's probably something that we need to improve. We talked a little bit about this already, but highlights from dairy cattle: cull early if you can. Try to remove that animal at a higher body condition score, which minimizes bruising and improves that fitness for transport. Pay attention to stocking density on those trailers and cattle pots. Minimize full udders if you can. I know that's really challenging because you may not have the access to sell directly to a packing plant, but if you can, milk those animals out before you sell them. And then work with your treatment and euthanasia protocols with your herd vet. But veterinarians can really support producers in making these euthanasia and culling decisions. And then all of us need to consider what it means when that animal leaves your farm in that condition. Do you want that to be the billboard for our industry, but also your farm? If we have protocols, sometimes that takes the decision making away from the producer and the employees, and it makes it easier to make that euthanasia decision. And I will encourage everybody to have those, or to be BQA certified or BQA transportation certified, and use your industry education, which I'm about to go into. So I do want to point out that we partner with the National Dairy Farm Program on a number of things, but mostly with our animal care and animal welfare guidance. So any farm that is certified under the National Dairy Farm Program is considered a BQA equivalent. And so we care about the dairy industry. We care about we care about you guys, period. But we care about how these animals are being taken care of. We know that they have a second career coming into the beef industry. That's why we partner with the farm program so much. But a reminder that they have lots of great resources in animal care, biosecurity, antibiotic stewardship, workforce development, environmental stewardship. Lots of great resources that you can check out to try to improve how we take care of those animals so that we can make better decisions when we're culling those animals too. Lots of great resources in both English and Spanish. Beef Quality Assurance also has some brand new resources that I encourage you to check out. Our new manual came out in 2024, and our field guide just came out this year. Field guide is an abbreviated version of our beef quality assurance program, but they provide a lot of guidance and then resources where you can go look even further if you would like on a variety of topics. If you aren't already certified, contact our great trainers and state coordinators in Wisconsin, or we have some online training opportunities that you can check out. BQA transportation is focused on both the professional driver, so that's mostly our fed cattle animals, but also we call it the farmer rancher module, but those are more for our pull behind trailers or our cull animals, but we just translated these into Spanish. So if you have any drivers that would like to learn in Spanish, those online modules are available, and we're just super excited that those are out. But I'm going to end there. But those are some things that we have talked about within our cull cattle management on both the beef and the dairy side. I think there are very similar themes between the industries, and then there are just there's some details that are different. But if anybody's interested, they can go and check these out. The beef document is on the NCBA website. The dairy cattle document is on the farm website. But I also want to recognize our partners in CattleFax also helped with both of these documents to provide an economic viewpoint of cull cow management too. So that is all I have. So we are ready to take some questions.
Great, Dr. Herman. Thank you so much. And if anyone has looked at this document or has not seen it yet, it is a really, really well researched, very clear and easy to follow document. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to look at that, just check it out, go online and take a look at it. It is very useful. So you guys have done a great job of putting that together. And the cattle facts part of it, where you do talk about the economics of it, yes, it definitely is something for people to take a look at and really absorb. So I have a couple of questions talking about the producer end of it, and from your point of view. And Jake, if you're on, you can turn your camera on, and Mike, and so I'll have some questions for both of you. But for Julia, where do you see producers often miss the right time to market a cow? And what are those consequences of waiting too long? You've touched on it a little bit, but where are they missing that opportunity on the farm?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so much nuance to every question and to every situation, honestly. But I mentioned like sometimes we're a little too hopeful for recovery. I think having stricter, I call it stricter criteria on how they're improving. So like, um, like a down animal, for instance, if that animal is not improving with medical treatment within 24 hours, she's going to get euthanized, because that is a welfare component that we need to take seriously. For other types of I don't want to call it illnesses, but like lameness, I think if we maybe we just call that animal when she's a lameness score of 2 instead of waiting until she's a 3. And so I think it's challenging ourselves to make sure that we put the cow first and not just I know we have to think about economics when it comes down to this, but we also have to think of that cow and the way the trips that some of these animals take. I think understanding that might be a really long trip for her, and being realistic on if she can actually make that trip. I think that also makes it easier on our transporters. It makes it easier on our auction markets when we don't send animals that are already compromised from the farm to into that system. I'd love to hear Jake's viewpoint on that too.
I agree with you 100%, and maybe I'm incorrect, but I think with some of the very large dairies, and I guess it's even some of the smaller farms you see in our particular area here. Um, well, the farmer, the animal's going to get better, the animal's going to get better, so they do everything they can. Well, with all the drug residue withholds and that, they doctor this animal for, say, hoof rot. Well, now we're holding this animal for 30 days or whatever the withhold is on the treatment. Well, in that same time, she comes up lame on another foot. Well, now we got to wait for the withhold, so that animal's condition keeps deteriorating. Um, On the flip side of it, depending on the cow again, is it something that on day one when you diagnosed her with hoof rot, should she have gone on the truck and been salvageable to either direct to slaughter? And I will tell my producers that there are certain cows that need to go from the farm to the slaughter facility, especially in our locale here. Um, we're 25 to 30 miles from two of the biggest kill cow plants in the US. So if that cow is in poor condition, put her on the truck, get her there with the hopes that she will make it through the slaughter facility and be able to be salvaged. You bring them into the sale barn, you haul her 30 miles the other direction into a sale barn. Regardless if it's equity or private ones, wherever the case may be. Now you put her into like now in particular, cold concrete barns. If that cow has to stay around, we do provide bedding and everything, but our barn is way colder than any of the milking barns they come out of. So that animal's going to be on that cold concrete. Yes, we do feed and water. We don't supply, they're not getting the TMR, they're getting dry hay. So you're changing their diet. They're probably not getting as much energy from the hay as they were from the TMR. So the condition of them cattle continue to deteriorate as she's standing around waiting for the truck to make that 30-mile trip back to Green Bay. And with the residues too, once you get that medicine in there, prior to I'll use an example. When I worked for the state of Wisconsin, yet when I first started, we worked directly with FDA on drug residues before they outlawed LA 200 in lactating dairy cattle. Small farm, 30 cow, older gentleman. He documented every record of any time a cow had ever gotten shot. 18 months prior to this cow being sold for slaughter, she was injected for pneumonia with LA 200. 18 months later, her kidneys and liver all come back suspect with liquamycin in the liver.
Wow.
Yeah. So I believe that's one of the reasons why LA 200 got pulled off of the shelves for lactating dairy cattle. So, that's where, you'd brought that one thing up or about the drug residues also, but that's one of the biggest concerns in knock on wood, Wisconsin. We get the list every week. I think we only have one farm on it in the entire state right now on the violator list, which is very good compared to what it was, 10 years ago. So
I think one of the things that I've talked about with other veterinarians in various sectors, including the dairy industry, is, how many times is that animal going to get treated? And so, say it's a lameness cow, like, are you going to treat her one time, two times, whatever? And maybe that's a limit that operations can work with their veterinarian on and be like, if we have a lameness, we're only going to do it twice, and then we're going to really reevaluate, and then maybe we ship her instead of just continuing to retreat. I think dairies have a lot of dairies have a lot more data to also make that decision, because I know that milking, how much milk they're providing daily is one component of that decision. But definitely use your, like, it's not just the lameness, it's the whole picture. So how is she doing overall, and how can we make a better decision for her when we make those culling decisions?
one other thing I'll say, and I think we may have a communication barrier too on some of the large, really large dairies too, where the milkers or the employees moving the cattle from the free stalls into the holding areas aren't relaying that message to the higher up, saying, okay, cow number 47, 43, whatever the case may be. They're not relaying that information, that this cow struggles getting up out of the free stalls. She's the last cow to the parlor holding area every time. I think there's some miscommunication there. We either they don't care, or it's an actual language barrier where, this is my job, this is what I do, and I don't worry about the next step. I think we see some of that too, where the information is not getting relayed up the chain to the farm manager or the owner and saying, hey, this cow's got really sore feet, this cow needs to either be treated, hoof trimmer, or sent to slaughter. I think there's some miscommunication in there too. So
I think the communication piece within farm, but also across sectors, is really important, and that's something we talk about in the cattle industry. Period. I think we have to care about the animal beyond when it's out of our care, right? And so with this cull cow management piece, it's when we have to care about how that animal is once she leaves our farm. And similar to what you just talked about, Jake, we have to care about that animal beyond when it's within our responsibility, even if it's within the farm. And I think we do that. I think overall we do that well. We can always improve. And so I think that's a piece that we're trying to get at with this cull cow management guidance.
I do have a question for you though, Julia. Is that a federal law with the hobbles? Because I know, and I won't mention any names, but I know that the two big plants in Green Bay will euthanize them there on the dock. But we do have a plant here in Wisconsin that kills a fair amount of cattle that will take them.
Uh, my understanding is if they are USDA inspected, then hobbles are considered a way that they are assisted to walk. And so that would be a USDA question to confirm. But my understanding is that's how I've been guiding people, is like they should not have hobbles when they go to the plant. If you have a local plant, like you're taking that animal directly to slaughter, and then that meat is only going to your family, those plants have a little bit more, I guess, flexibility, if you will. But that would definitely be a USDA question.
All right.
Okay, I have a question. This just to kind of maybe you've kind of already answered this, but from your perspective, what handling or management issue does the most damage to cow welfare at the end of her life? So prior to shipping, and maybe you've already talked about this, we've talked about record keeping. That one's kind of, that one does the most long-term damage to the farm itself. But I'm not sure. What do you think in that perspective?
Yeah, poor record keeping can really bite everybody in the hind end, especially with residues, like Jake already talked about. I think when it comes to transportation, in the dairy industry, I will just point to the dairy industry. I do think stocking density is a big one. So sometimes we try to put too many cattle on the load because we know that we have a load going, so we may as well try to put, animals on. But I think there's a welfare component to that, but there's also, bruising is not just a product problem, it's a welfare problem. Because those animals are rubbing against, they could be rubbing against the inside of the trailer. Those thinner animals also, that, like we mentioned, they are more likely to go down because of energy, depending on how long that trip is. So I think body condition score is a big one. One other thing that I will talk about is facility design, both at the dairy and honestly at anywhere in between there and the harvest facility. So it could be the auction market, it could be the consolidation locations. Our cows are bigger than they used to be, and so there are some facilities that have not, I guess, upgraded with the size of the cattle. And so when you're putting bigger animals through smaller facilities, you also run into a welfare and a bruising problem. And so I think evaluating our facilities to make sure they can handle the size of the animals and the temperament of our animals. I know dairy animals are generally very well tempered, but I do put the temperament in there just in case. But making sure that our facilities can manage those animals, I think those are ways that we can. Those animals are going through those facilities every day. So I think that's a huge piece where we can improve welfare and handling a lot if we improve facilities. And I'll finish with training. We in the ag industry have we don't have many people who have grown up in the industry and are coming back to the industry. We have a lot of folks who don't have a livestock background and are coming into our industry. We need to teach them the right things. We need to teach them what to do, not just for our animals, but for also the human safety component. And so I think how we train our workers in any sector of the cattle industry is huge in how we improve animal welfare.
I'll just kind of follow up with Julia's answers here, but the one thing I will say is if you are setting up a facility where you're holding cattle on your dairies to load cattle, if you look at the trailers we're running around with now, these guys are running 40, 45-foot goosenecks. They've made everything bigger but the back door. So if you're setting up a facility, set it up where the cows have to funnel down into one at a time into the door, or set up the facility so that you can open the entire back door of the trailer so they have unimpeded access onto that trailer. The other thing I will say is, these guys are running these big trailers. They're, 12, 14, 16 inches high in the back. Set your facility up so them cattle walk straight on the trailer instead of having to jump into it. That's when them cows are jumping, they're hitting both sides of the doors. You're retaining a lot of bruising in that aspect. The other thing too is if you have a big wide open space and they all try to get two in the door at the same time, you're bruising, one cow's side, the other cow's shoulders. And with that, and me and Bill from the western part of the state that does the BQA training, I always forget his last name. I apologize. I believe it's Hefman or Hafman.
Yep.
We've talked about this numerous times at BQA trainings. Most of the injuries we're seeing coming out of the pots is when the cattle can go down in without the bruising, but when they come back up, they hit and we've talked about that, and some of the potbelly trailers they're actually moved the top deck a little bit forward, so it's opened it up a little bit more. And when me and Bill have talked about that, they've got a trap door to go over the belly where they stand in the back. They should put a flip door in the top also, so when them cattle go down, it opens that space up wider, so it alleviates any of the chances of the taller cows, because the top and the bottom, when you look at the inside of the trailers, the top and the bottom are exactly the same height. There's no difference in the heights of the two decks. It's just that the curvature when they go down, or the angle when they go down into the trailer, is where the bruising occurs. The other thing that a lot of the trailer manufacturers did now too is went with a flip up ramp along the side of the trailer instead of the pull out ramps, which were roughly 4 to 6 inches down below. So if you do get a little bit taller cow, that cow could potentially be rubbing on that rails all the way to transport if she can't get spun around into a more comfortable position. One other thing I'll talk to on that note too is, when you were talking about, poor thin cows, what a lot of people don't understand is when one cow goes down, when you're going down the highway, it creates a domino effect. So you may only have one cow that's in poor condition, but she goes down, you may have 3 to 4 or 5 other cows piled up over the top of her, because when they move in that trailer, when they're moving down the highway, it's constant movement. One falls over the top, and it just keeps adding to the mess. So if you can always keep your slow cows, a lot of these new trailers are running either what they call a split or triaxles, with a back end that's way larger. Actually, the tails are now the same. All the other than the counterbalance in the trailers, which is a small area right behind the tractor. All the other areas are all exactly the same size. So you put your compromised animals on the back, so it's a straight walk in and a straight walk off. So
Okay, well, we unfortunately are out of time. I think we could have probably just sat here and had you two talk to each other the entire time. That would have been great. With that, thank you to both of you. Thanks for participating today. This was very informational. We had really good participation from attendees today as well. Please, everybody who's still on, join us next month on January 20th for From Field to Feed, what we know about high oleic soybeans. To register and learn more about next month's webinar, please visit go.wisc.edu/Badger Dairy. And for additional information or unbiased university-based dairy resources, please visit Extension Dairy Program on the web at dairy.extension.wisc.edu or find us on Facebook at Extension Agriculture. Thank you and have a great afternoon.